Being able to draw these covalent compounds is only part of what we need to accomplish now. The next thing we're going to discuss is the shapes that they make. There's something called a molecular geometry and an electron geometry. After that, we need to discuss whether the sharing of the electrons between the covalent bond is equal, which would be called a nonpolar bond, or whether it's unequal, which is called a polar bond. So first things first, let's talk about the geometries or shapes of these particular compounds. So the main thing you want to pay attention to is the center atom. The atoms out on the extremities are not all that important when it comes to the particular shape that the molecule is going to produce. It is all about the center atom and how many bonds it has, and more importantly, how many unbonded pairs of electrons are on that center atom. That will tell you almost everything you need to know in order to determine the shape of a molecule. Okay, so again, what we have here in table 9.2, it's called, is if we have a structure that looks kind of like this, we have two bonded pairs, we have no unbonded pairs. So notice right here, carbon does not contain any unbonded pairs. That's why this is 0. What that's going to do is that's going to be called a linear shape. It's perfectly straight. From one oxygen through the carbon to the next oxygen is going to be extremely straight. An example of this would be this right here, which is carbon dioxide. The carbon is the black dot, and the two red are the oxygens. Notice the double bonds. They are at a 90-degree angles, which is not very important. But notice the straight linearity between the red, black, and red atoms here. This is a linear compound. Another example of a linear compound would be something like, well, nitrogen. Again, nitrogen is actually N2. It'd be nitrogen with a triple bond between the two of them. You'd have a dot here, dot, 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 dot. Again, there is no center atom, but it would look a whole lot like this. Actually, a little bit more like this is a double bond. This is a single bond. I don't have a model that shows a triple bond, but you get the idea. From orange to orange or red to red, these are linear structures, okay? This orange one, again, could be a very good example, would be hydrogen, which is H2. That's just a hydrogen with a single bond to a hydrogen. That would be like this. Or oxygen, which is O2. That's a double bond. Like this, that would be oxygen with a double bond. Okay, so you guys can see again the linear nature of these, whether it's just two atoms, obviously it's going to be linear, or if it has three atoms, then we're going to need some sort of no unbonded pairs on this particular center atom, which in this case is carbon. Carbon again has 4 dots, and all 4 are involved in a bond of some sort. So that is why it's called a linear, whoops, ouch, blooper reel. That is why we have a linear structure for these compounds, okay? So that's linear. The next one we're going to talk about is when we have 3 atoms off a center carbon. That's interesting, it didn't have bent. Okay, well, we're just going to change the order of this, and I need to add one. The next one we're going to have is something called trigonal planar. And, oh, here's the bent. Okay, so here they are. So we have 3 atoms off the center atom. If we have no unbonded pairs, what I mean by that is notice the boron has no extra electrons left alone, no unbonded pairs of electrons. What that's going to look like is a flat version of this. Trigonal planar is a triangle that is flat, hence the name trigonal, triangle, planar, flat. A flat triangle or trigonal planar, completely flat. So if boron here in blue had extra electrons in a pair, what it would do, it would make a different shape, which I'll tell you about in just a moment, okay? But this is called trigonal planar. 3 atoms off the center carbon or center atom, and this one has no unbonded pairs of electrons. The next one we're going to talk about where we have some atoms. We have 2 bonded pairs and 1 extra electrons. Notice right here we have that extra electrons. What that's going to do is form a bent shape. So what you can't see here, again, this is oxygen, oxygen, and nitrogen in this particular example. What you can't see is there's 2 extra electrons located right here. And those electrons are going to push this oxygen down and push that oxygen down. So instead of being a linear shape, it's going to be a bent shape because the center atom has two unbonded electrons, or one pair of unbonded electrons. So this is called a bent shape. All right, the next one we're going to have is one of the easiest to spot. We have 4 atoms off the center atom. In this case, it's probably going to be carbon. We have no unbonded pairs, so notice the carbon does not have any extra electrons. And so that would be this shape right here. This is called tetrahedral. Tetrahedral. You guys all know tetra means 4. So we have 4 yellow atoms off the center black atom. Okay? 4 yellow off the one black. This is tetrahedral. Okay? Again, no extra electrons that are not bonded on the center carbon in this case. That's tetrahedral. On the other hand, if we do have a unbonded pair of electrons, again, represented right there, or you could find them right there on ammonia, what we get is something called trigonal pyramidal, or just pyramidal. So again, we have a center atom here. In this case, it's nitrogen. We have 3 hydrogens off the side, but notice how it's not flat. Trigonal planar is flat. Pyramidal is shaped like a pyramid. The reason why these are bent down towards the bottom of your screen is because we have extra electrons right here in an unbonded pair, and they're going to repel and push down on these atoms here, making it more into a pyramid shape. Again, that's called pyramidal. Okay, again, you can't see it, but there's an unbonded pair located at the top of this atom right here, and that's going to bend these down versus, again, here, which is the trigonal planar, where there is no electrons here, no unbonded pairs, which would shift these back up to look completely flat. Okay. The last one we need to talk about is, again, called bent. This is where you have, again, possibly 2 sets of unbonded pairs of electrons. Again, that's going to look, again, very similar to this. Okay, so those are all the molecular and electron geometries that we're going to talk about. Okay, another example of methanol. If you remember, methanol is CH3OH. That's methanol. So you have the C, you have 3 H's, 1, 2, 3 off the C. There's the O and an H. This right here is called the alcohol. That's the methanol. And this is the methyl group. So this is methanol. What shape this makes, I don't know what this is called, other than odd, for lack of better terms. So those are the main shapes that we will be discussing. Again, notice there is something called a molecular geometry, which is what is the shape of the atoms. We're talking about, in this particular case, they're just calling them A and B. And then we have something called the electron geometry, which is more about what space does the electrons take up. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some practice in the next video. But again, here we're just trying to introduce what are the shapes and what molecular and electron geometries can they take.